Hello there, welcome to this lecture. It is called the Introduction to Computer Security. So I'm a lecturer who's going to be taking in this course. My name is, you can call me Mr. Wadia. Okay, so now computer security issues. So now before we start looking at computer security issues, we first need to establish the objectives that are supposed to be met at the end of this lesson, and also we also need to learn the importance of computer security. Why is computer security important? You know, nowadays everything is about security and privacy, so you need to know and understand the difference between the two. Okay, enough intro, let's now dig in. Okay, so now for us to be able to understand the word computer security itself, we first need to look at the objectives. Okay, so here we are saying the only system which is truly secure is one which is switched off and unplugged, locked in a titanium lined safe, buried in a concrete bunker, and is surrounded by nerve gas and very highly paid armed guards. Even then I wouldn't take stake life on it. Okay, so now what this simply means is, since we are talking about security, and we know that this time there are insecurity, there are people that are called hackers. We've got ethical ones and also unethical hackers. Okay, so now just introduce talk about a bit concerning the same. So ethical hacker, these are mostly hackers who hack mostly for educational purposes. We also have what we call unethical ones, these who force themselves to have access to people's information without people's approval. Okay, so now let's talk about the objectives that are supposed to be met at the end of this lesson. Okay, so beware of the objectives of computer security and the main techniques for realizing these objectives. Be able to describe basic authentication techniques. So be able to talk more about authentication as we go on in this lecture. For now, we're just doing the introductory part of it so that you know where we are going. You have an idea. Okay, so also need to be aware of the access control models and their importance to authorization mechanisms. Be able to describe basic authorization techniques. Okay, so the picture here is simply showing the security part, how maybe a certain device is having a certain device is protected using various or different types of authentication methods. All right. So now let's talk about the security. What is security? So security is management of access to a resource of the system. So management of access to a resource of the system. So having access to computer resources, it can be a computer, it can be any gadget, or even a phone. So a complete understanding of security should address the following. So the first one that needs to be addressed by the complete understanding of security is, how does security work? How does the security system work? Okay, the second one, we're saying, how is the system vulnerable and what are the threats? So we need to identify the loopholes of any system and also the threats that are likely to occur. Okay, so how do we prevent harm to the system? So now after identifying and the threats, the type of threats, we also need to put in some measures, or the measures that can be taken or that can be put in place so that we are able to protect any system. Okay, so how do we detect and respond to attacks on the system? An attack on a system is simply an unauthorized access or an attempt to access a resource where no access is permitted. For example, we can give an example here. Hackers, they are unethical ones. They attempt to have information, someone's information, without that person's consent. So that's what the last statement here is simply trying to talk about. Okay, so this was the definition of what security is. Before we define what computer security itself is, we first need to understand the security part. I know you've got ideas on what a computer is and also what's involved, what makes up a computer. Now today we'll be looking at the security. So now you should be able to connect the security part and also the computer part before you can define the whole computer security. The whole computer security. Okay. So computer security, we are saying, is the protection of computing systems, and the data that they store or access. Computer security rests on the three important things. The first one, we call it confidentiality issue. Then the second one, we call it integrity. The third one, we call it availability. Okay. So now we'll be able to talk about each one of them in detail. So pay attention and make sure you have somewhere where you're taking note of the important points, especially the examples that I'm giving. Most of them, if you've noticed, they are not in these slides. So make sure you are attentive, you're paying attention. Okay, so now we've talked about the three important things that are under computer security. So that's the definition of computer security. So now let's talk a bit on the three things that are involved in computer security. Okay, so the first one is confidentiality. So I'm sure you've heard of this word. People say no, these results are confidential, these documents are confidential, this and that is confidential. Okay, so you should be able to relate that the normal meaning of confidentiality part to the confidentiality that has to do with computer systems. Okay, so by definition, confidentiality, we are saying confidentiality is the concealment of information or resources, or the guiding of information. Yeah, especially, for example, the field that I can give where I think there's a lot, they take confidentiality to be an issue. It's in the army, and also the health counselors, those who counsel and guides people there, those are expected to be keeping people's information. They are not supposed to be sharing any information, like the way it is when you go for HIV testing. That one, it's just confidential. Whatever the results, it's just the conversation is just between you and the person who is trying to counsel you. So that's where we now is supposed to establish the confidentiality part. Okay, so access control mechanisms support confidentiality. We'll be able to talk more about the access control mechanisms and how it supports the issues of confidentiality. Okay, so one access control mechanism for preserving confidentiality is cryptography. So the one access control mechanism we are saying here that is used for preserving confidentiality is called cryptography. So now, before we go any further, I would like to pose a question on the same cryptography. What is cryptography? Okay, so cryptography, I'm sure this word to some of you is new, but to some of you who've been doing a lot of research, who've been studying, I'm sure it's not something new. So let's try to define what it means, or give an example that can help someone to define what cryptography is. Okay, so the simple definition that we can give on cryptography, we can say this is the encrypting of plain text to computer text. Okay, by computer text we mean the in text that people cannot understand. So the encrypting of plain text to computer text. Okay, there's a term that we use apart from the computer text. Okay, so the changing of information, for example, if we want to let us maybe try to want to encrypt a certain information or maybe a password. Let's say the password is ABC. So now, instead of me telling someone or sending it to someone to say, okay, the password, if you want to have access to this this account, it's ABC. No, I won't say that, but I will try to encrypt that ABC. If you want, I can even use, maybe I replace the letters with numbers. So A is on the first, that's the first letter in the alphabet. So then B second, C third. So I just say 1, 2, 3 in the alphabet. Someone will be able to know that, okay, this 1, 2, 3, it is representing the letters that are in the alphabet, like in that order. So that's the issue of cryptography. Okay, which scrambles data to make it incomprehensible. So someone who doesn't know or who doesn't have the key cannot be able to understand what this cryptography is, unless if the password or any information is just in plain text form. Okay, I'm sure it's clear on that one. Let's make progress. That's it about the computer security. So we continue with the computer security. We are saying, note that concealed information can be unencrypted. So now we'll be able to do even some practicals on how we can encrypt data, and also how the data can be decrypted or unencrypted. Okay, so unencrypted or is not equal to decrypted. Resource hiding is another important aspect of confidentiality. What do we mean by resource hiding? For example, not broadcasting an SSID on a Wi-Fi IP. So when we start looking at networks, we should be able to understand what we mean by SSID on a Wi-Fi, and also the full definition of what this Wi-Fi means. So the Wi-Fi is not the word, actually it's an abbreviation. So we should be able to talk about those things so that you understand where we are going and what we are trying to talk about. Okay, let's make progress. Integrity. So we've talked about, we are still talking about the three parts that are involved in the computer security. The first one was confidentiality. So we are done with the confidentiality part. We come to integrity. So as we move on in this order, you should also be able to differentiate what is the difference between confidentiality and integrity, or integrity and the availability or availability and confidentiality. Okay, so that you understand these things. You know, these things they are real, they happen. So this is the beauty about computers, especially the security part. This is real life. You should be able to relate whatever theory part we're talking about here to real life situations. I'm sure you've got gadgets where you've put passwords, PIN. Yeah. So now let's start the integrity part. So integrity, we are saying it refers to the trustworthiness of data or resources, and is usually phrased in terms of preventing improper or unauthorized change. Okay, sure, this definition to some of you sounds like Chinese, but we should be able to explain more on that so that you understand. Integrity mechanisms, it also fall into two classes. So the first one is the prevention mechanism, and the second one is detection mechanism. So here we'll start with the first one, which is the prevention mechanism. So prevention mechanism, we are saying it seeks to maintain data integrity by blocking any unauthorized attempts to change the data or any attempts to change the data in unauthorized ways. What do we mean by when we say this? Okay, so a practical example that can be given on the prevention mechanism is, for example, since we don't want our data to be changed, or we don't want anyone to tamper with our data. So let's say I'm making this presentation. This presentation, I can put a password and send it to someone, or just put in the password and send it to someone. So if that person opens the same Word, it can be in any format, whether PDF, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or different formats. So that person won't be able to edit that file without the permission from the owner of the file. Okay, so now by doing that, we are trying to prevent people, or we are calling in this case unauthorized users, those users that are not authorized to have access to our files. Okay, so detection mechanism, we are done with the prevention mechanism part. We come to the second mechanism. So the second one, it's detection mechanism. So do not try to prevent violations of integrity. They simply report that the data's integrity is no longer trustworthy. Okay, I'm sure this one, some of you who likes using internet a lot, you've experienced maybe where the site is saying, no, this site is not, it's not secure, it's not trusted, or the file you're trying to download, it may be harmful to your computer or your device. You've seen such. Okay, so we are done with the integrity party. Now we go to the last one. So the last one, which is availability. So availability, what do you mean by availability? What is the importance of availability? So for today, we're just doing the introductory part. Then in the next lecture, we'll be able to elaborate more on especially the importance of confidentiality, importance of integrity, importance of availability, advantages and disadvantages. Yes. So let's start with the availability. So availability, we are saying it refers to the ability to use the information or resource desired. The ability to use the information or resource desired. To use the information, meaning if I want to have access maybe to a certain website, I should be able to access that website anytime that I want. Meaning that information is available there. If you are not able to have access to such information, it means there's no availability of data there. Okay, so availability is an important aspect of reliability, because an unavailable system is at least as bad as no system at all. Okay, what do we mean when we say it's as bad as no system at all? For example, let's use Zanaco as an example. You go to Zanaco ATM machine, you want to withdraw cash, then the system there, you find that no, the system is not working. Every time you go there, it's just saying no, it's not working, or maybe it's in progress. So meaning that institution, I'm just giving it as an example, meaning that institution is not, people or customers are not going to trust they will lose trust in that institution. The meaning they can't rely on that institution for their financial issues. Okay, so the aspect of availability that is relevant to security is that someone may deliberately deny access to data or to a device by making it unavailable. So how we'll be able to look at now how those people, the unauthorized users, are able to make the service or any websites unavailable to the users when the users needs maybe to access that info that site. Yes. Okay, so there is what we call DOS, which is the denial of service. So denial of service is a type of attack that makes data or a resource unavailable when it's not supposed to. So again, which site can I use? Which site most use? Okay, so we can use the TCZ website, for example. It's just an example. So for example, when you're trying to access information on the TCZ, mostly it's unavailable. Yeah, it's unavailable. Some sites may be unavailable maybe due to bad network, but others it may be because someone has tampered with the site, which we are calling the denial of service. So meaning you'll be denied service to have access to that site. Okay, we move on. Computer security continues. So access control. So if you remember when we were doing the introduction, we also touched a bit on the access control. So now what is this access control? Why is it important? Why are we using it here? Why are we mentioning the access control under computer security? Okay, so now the process of limiting access to the resources of a system to only authorized persons, programs, processes, or other systems. I'll read that again. Access control is the process of limiting access to the resources of a system to only authorized persons, programs, processes, or other systems. Okay, so this one here, it's simple and it's self-explanatory. You understand what I'm saying. It's simple and self-explanatory when I give this example. Okay, so an example that we can give here is let's take an example of an institution. Let's say this is UNZA. So UNZA, we all know that it's a big institution, and it's got different schools and different departments also. We've got accounts department, we've got registrar's office. So now when they are accessing information, the registrar cannot have access to the accounts office. The registrar will be restricted to just have the information which he or she requires, and not information to do with money. So that's what we mean by limiting access. So that you just be limited to that. As a student, you cannot check the finances of the school, but you are only limited to check maybe your courses, when you are the timetable, and also you're able to check the results. You cannot go beyond what you've been given as your access. That's what we mean. Only to authorize access, and then you also be given the credentials that you're supposed to be using when you want to have access maybe to the Moodle student portal, Moodle, yeah, like that. And also program and processors or other systems. So I'm sure it's now clear on the access control part. Okay, let's make progress. Authentication. Authentication, this word is used almost in everyday life, the authentication word. So authentication by definition, we are saying the process to verify the identity of a user, device, or other entity in a computer system, often a prerequisite to allowing access to resources. I'll just read that one again. So the process to verify and identify of a user, device, or other entity in a computer system, often a prerequisite to allowing access to resources. So by resources meaning maybe allowing access to some files. So yeah, it can, yeah, different files, pictures, documents, such. Okay. So now the authentication, this is the most interesting part where we've reached. So make sure you pay attention and also just write down the important points and the examples that will be given under authentication. Okay, so the authentication here, we're simply talking about let's say I have a gadget, I have this my mobile phone here. For me to access this phone, I have to put some security measures, maybe like putting a pin or a password. Others will even put patterns, face recognition or voice recognition, fingerprints, yeah, biometric stuffs. Okay. So that's what basically authentication is, giving access, like the things you are supposed, the device that the things that your device is supposed to use to give you access. For example, you can use a fingerprint to your phone. If it's a laptop, computer, you can put a password, the pin, yeah, and the other authentication processes that can be used for you to have access to your system or your device. Okay, so this one I'm sure it's pretty clear here. You put phones, you put passwords, cell phones. Some of you, I'm sure, even on some apps, you've restricted some apps. They can only be accessed by you when you are authenticated. For example, WhatsApp, majority of you put the passwords so that no one can have access to WhatsApp information apart from yourself and you. Okay, let's make progress. We also have what we are calling the non-repudiation. So the non-repudiation, by definition, we are saying method by which the sender is provided with proof of delivery and the recipient is assured of the sender's identity, so that neither can later deny having possessed the data. Non-repudiation, method by which the sender is provided with proof of delivery and the recipient is assured of the sender's identity, meaning in this case the recipient knows that okay, the sender is this one here, so there is proof there. So okay, so now having talked about the three important things that are under the computer security part, let us now talk a bit on why do we need security. Why is computer security important? Okay, so now from what we've talked about, I'm sure you can be able to come up with some of the reasons as in why we need security, especially that you have your cell phones. Why did you put the password there? Why did you put the pin to your device? So those are the reasons that we'll be talking about here. Why do we need security? Okay, so the first one, we're saying to protect sensitivity resources. Maybe you want to protect the, I don't know what you protect on your devices, but mostly it's just files, maybe academic credentials and all that. Yeah. Prevent trolls. If anyone is able to have access to your device, someone can maybe delete something from your device, meaning there will be loss of data or information there. Okay, so also prevent damage. Someone maybe can infect your files with viruses, so we need security to be able to prevent such. Prevent damage in the context of information systems. Also prevent unauthorized users from reading what they are not supposed to read. Information rules guarantee confidentiality. So meaning security, it guarantees the users the confidentiality party, because no one can have access to their files because there is security. Okay. Prevent unauthorized users from tampering with information. So the tampering of information, in this case we're talking about maybe damaging files, tampering with the information that you consider to be very confidential. Guarantee integrity. Understand what we mean by integrity. So now, having talked about the reasons why security is important to us as users, let us also now look at how do we implement security. So now, the first one was saying add mechanisms to prevent access to sensitive resources, rocks. So we'll be able to talk more on, we'll be able to elaborate more on these, the implementation part. So guards, how do you now gain access to protected resources? We'll be able to discuss more on the next lecture. Locks are opened with keys. Keys have to be distributed to users. Guards only allow certain people in. Guards have to be given a list of trusted users. Yes. Now, as we wait for the next lecture, I would like each and every person who is watching this video to just maybe try to answer those questions, the questions that I've passed. Okay, just pause a bit and then you try to answer, see if you can be able to remember something from what we've talked about today. Okay, so for me, Mr. Wadia, we can end here for today since we're just doing the introductory part to security, or rather computer security. All right, thank you for your attention. Have a good day.